Good morning. Welcome to the Colorado League of Charter Schools School Safety Plan webinar series. This is the first webinar in a series of 5, Crafting a Charter School Safety Plan, the School Response Framework. I am Tiffany Kalovic, the Director of Member Business Services at the League. We are pleased you could join us. If you would like to chat with us or interact with us during this session, please notice the chat box area to the right of your screen. Feel free to send in questions or comments during the session. We will also leave time at the end for questions. If for any reason we cannot get to all of the questions before the end of our time slot today, my contact information will be available up on the final slide. We would like to thank our generous sponsor of this webinar series, School Safe Communications. School Safe is dedicated to providing reliable and direct two-way radio-based products that bridge the gap between schools and first responders. What makes School Safe unique is that they couple this network-based solution with safety training that delivers certified ready capabilities. And the result is simpler, clearer, and faster communication between school personnel and first responder agencies. If you are interested in obtaining two-way radios or the safety training on these devices, please reach out to Mike Coleman. Mike Coleman and the School Safe Communications team are also on the League School Safety Advisory Committee. Thank you again, Mike. Our agenda for today, before we get into that, I want to note this webinar provides guidance to schools preparing and/or revising their safety plans. It is not legal advice. Be sure to have your legal counsel and your authorizer review your plan to ensure full compliance with all federal, state, and local regulations. In our series, we are going to be briefly discussing why you need a safety emergency response plan by informing you of the Presidential Policy Directive, PPD-8, and the Colorado School Safety Act, specifically Section 4. Today, we're going to go into the U.S. Department of Education's recommended 6-step process. We will be addressing the first 2 today, forming a collaborative planning team and understanding the situation. Please take note that our second webinar is scheduled for September 20th, and at that time we will go into step 3, determining goals and objectives. If anyone would like to move ahead or obtain more information on the safety planning process, please feel free to obtain the resource listed below. It is provided by the Readiness and Emergency Management for Schools Technical Assistance Center, or REMS, and their comprehensive guide is actually the basis for most of our webinar series. Why is it that all public schools in Colorado are required to have a safety emergency response plan? Presidential Policy Directive number 8 is the reason. It was signed in March 2011 by President Obama. And the directive, basically our lessons learned from after 9/11 are that school emergency efforts need to be aligned with the emergency practices at the national, state, and local levels to be the most effective. The directive also states that your plan needs to cover responses before, during, and after an incident. If you are interested in getting more details on this, please again seek the resource that is attached there from the Department of Homeland Security. Now, PPD-8 defines preparedness around 5 mission areas: prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. So you're going to want to make sure that throughout your planning with your team that you keep those mission functions in mind. What is the Colorado School Safety Act? The Colorado Revised Statutes, specifically Section 4, is a component of the Colorado Safe Schools Act, and it addresses the school safety readiness and incident management plan, specifically your school response framework. It states that each Board of Education shall establish a school response framework. You as a charter school are also responsible for this. Many of you may be using your authorizer's plan, and if so, there are certain pieces you'll need to make sure are actually applicable to your specific campus and staff, and also executable by your campus and staff. By satisfying the requirements of this section, you will be in compliance with FEMA's, the Federal Emergency Management Agency's, NIMS. NIMS is the National Incident Management System, and we will get into this as we go through today, the steps and processes. If you are interested in looking at the entire Colorado School Safety Act, that link will bring you to it as well. This page is actually just Section 4. You can see that it is long, it's comprehensive, and it's admin heavy, which is why the League wanted to produce this webinar series as a way to make it very manageable for our charter schools to implement and come into compliance with. We've broken it down to some of the major points of compliance just to give you an overview of what we're going to be going throughout the series. Basically, there are 16 points of compliance. We've pulled out a couple. Again, you must comply with the National Incident Management System, which is really, it's a template, and it's very systemic, so it's kind of plug and play to a degree. You just have to make it work for your school size. Again, if you are interested in looking at more information on NIMS, please see the link below. Your school must formally adopt the NIMS framework through a resolution. You must institutionalize the ICS. The Incident Command System is a part of NIMS, and it is taught by FEMA. We'll get into that a little more detail later, but again, if you want to look at more information, please feel free to check out the link. You're going to have a school safety team with backups, and these will need to be identified in writing. Your school must enter an MOU with community partners, specifying responsibilities. Again, in this particular place, your authorizer may already have entered into MOUs, and you need to check with them to see if your charter school is a part of that or not. If you are not, you will need to do your own MOUs. Again, this is part of the whole series, so we'll get to that. Also, you're going to be creating an all hazards exercise program based on NIMS. You're going to conduct coordinated exercises that meet minimum standards, and you're going to have to adopt written procedures for taking action and communicating with local law enforcement. The good news is you are not reinventing the wheel. There are best practices in place, and we are here to give you that information. Continuing on with what those requirements are in the statute, the key emergency school personnel must complete the FEMA courses. Your key emergency personnel are going to be all of your school leadership. So the administrators, business managers, any assistant principals, anybody that's in a leadership position is going to need to take these courses. They are free and they are online. So very simple to take, and those are the links to get to those. And then you'll just need to have your certificates of completion available should you ever need them for an audit purposes. Once you've done this, and now that you're kind of aware of all of the requirements that you have, you need to have your board pass the resolution. So if you need samples of that or that language, please let us know. Typically, you can simply call out this actual requirement and put that in your resolution. But again, that needs to be done right away if it hasn't been done so already. All right, let's get into the actual process that you're going to need to do. The U.S. Department of Education has this 6-step recommended process, and it begins with forming a collaborative planning team. Again, this is just because you want to make sure that communication is as seamless as possible in the event of an incident, and that there's a coordination of efforts to achieve the best results. What should you do first? We're going to first identify your core planning team. This is going to be based on your school size. So we list here some of the folks who should definitely be considered to be on your team if you have them on staff. Again, work with who you have on staff first. Administrators, facility managers, business managers. If you have school counselors, these folks absolutely need to be a part of it, especially for the recovery portions. IT, because a lot of technology is available today for safety. Potentially parents, be very selective about that for sure, and potentially student leaders of your student governments or things of that nature. The other part of your core planning team is going to be community members. We highly recommend that you have the chiefs of police and fire. You reach out to your EMS personnel. If you have a school resource officer, public and mental health practitioners, local county emergency manager, hospitals, anyone in your community that would be concerned with health and safety of your students and your staff and others. So please be sure to kind of reach out to those folks, and many of them will already have some resources, again, that will be helpful when you are putting your plan together. One of the things I do want to mention here is sometimes the size of your school is going to make it difficult for you to get the engagement from the local chief of police or fire. If you have trouble with that, please feel free to reach out to the league, and we can see if we can be of help in kind of getting that engagement up, because it is very important, and should an incident occur, having them understand all the communications and how you're setting up your response is going to be absolutely critical. And you can see why, because that mix, again, make sure that an emergency incident is very well organized and comes to an effect that saves lives as it happens. So that's the first thing you're going to do as far as forming your collaborative plan. The next thing is forming a common framework, and this is where that incident command structure comes into play. This is a part of the NIMS requirements. So by instituting this, you are actually using a structure that all national and government, state, and local folks are familiar with. So it already begins to start affecting better communication. It's a structure, and it, again, at the end of that, you can see that it prevents there being any hindrance from jurisdictional boundaries. It divides the emergency response into 5 manageable functions. So you are going to need to have these functions covered no matter the size of your school. The command, the operations, planning, logistics, finance, and administration. If you want to go into those in a little bit more detail, because we don't have the time to do it in this session, please feel free to check out that link below. Now, what do these look like when they're in a structure? This is a sample incident command structure. You've got the incident commander, and then you have some support staff there. and then the other 4 pieces, which are the operations, the planning, the logistics, and the finance and administration. I want to stress to you that there's only one incident commander on scene. There may be an incident commander who's the primary may not be available immediately. In that case, you typically have someone who needs to bring the report and the information to the commander. And then the other folks, you might have a team. Basically, the structure shows a chain of command, again, to keep the organization and the communication very, very structured. And it's much more effective. Let's see what an actual charter school example of this ICS structure looks like. This is Pinnacle Charter School. Now, they are a larger charter school. They have 2,000 students. So most likely, you are not going to be having a structure this detailed, because I believe they have probably, gosh, almost 200 staff members. That's not the norm at our average charter school, so we get that. But the nice thing about this this picture here is that it does show you some of the actual functions that are within some of those larger functions, like in operation security, parent-student reunification, the transportation, the student care, the special needs. So those are pieces that are a part of it. Whether or not you have multiple people that are able to handle those is going to depend on the size of your school. Let's look at the incident commander, the information officer, safety officer, and liaison officer. Basically, Pinnacle has actually had the unfortunate opportunity to put their emergency plan into play multiple times for live events recently, over the past couple of years. So they have been able to learn some insights that many of us would not have gained, which is great. And they are very generous in sharing some of those insights with us. I will provide their contact information also at the end of the slide in case anyone wants to talk with her. They are very open to helping and sharing what they've learned. One of the things they've learned with the incident commander position, which goes against some of what most folks would think, is that you may not want to have your lead administrator being the incident commander. Why? It makes sense to have that. Actually, what they found is the lead administrator is usually who parents want to see and talk to when an emergency event is happening. The incident commander is completely involved in organizing and communication with emergency responders and has no time to do that. So if you place someone who's more of a safety organizer, maybe the chair of your safety team is the incident commander, that kind of thing, it usually works out better because the administrator can provide calmness. They've recognized that having that principal available to talk to parents, keep them informed, provides a level of calmness and reduces panic at the scene. So that's just a tip from them. You're going to have one information officer. That information officer is the person who talks to the media. And again, you see that that's different than the incident commander, because the incident commander is involved in the actual response with the emergency responders. Information officer is the person designated and must be prepared to talk to the media. Safety officer, we can get into that position a little bit later, and then also a liaison officer, we can get into some of those a little bit later. But this is kind of the idea, and I hope that's helpful to see how it looks. Okay, once you've kind of got the structure for your school, because you kind of want to see, well, what out of these 5 functions, are we going to be able to break it up a little bit more, or are we going to have to combine things? What's it going to look like? So once you kind of have an idea of what your structure is going to look like, you want to take those and start defining and assigning the roles. Now, this is where it has to be in writing that we mentioned earlier. You need to define the roles. And for example, let's look at the incident commander. what their responsibility is, the overall management of the incident. And then on most incidents, this activity is carried out by a single IC. And that IC, how they're selected, you may want to note that. Just if you have a lot of excited people who want to participate and volunteer, again, if you put some qualifications on there, it might help you as far as keeping some of those folks at bay and in positions where they can really be of help. The next piece of this whole definition is you want to delineate the responsibilities. And again, keeping this in writing, assess the situation, determine the incident objectives, on and on and on. The sample responsibilities for various roles can be found on the OSHA website, and I put the link there for you. So please feel free to check those out. I want to state another tip here from Pinnacle. You're going to need to have flexibility with your roles. So everyone on your safety team is going to be required to know their exact roles. Pinnacle suggests that you also have everybody know the other roles as well. And if they're clearly written out, it's easier for someone to take that step. Here's what has happened and why they would suggest that. Sometimes, even the incident commander, perhaps, or a safety coordinator is actually stuck in the lockdown when the lockdown happened. And you can't, they're not outside, they're not able to participate. So you need to have people who can step into that role if something like that happens, or perhaps they're on vacation, whatever, they're off-site. So be aware that backups, and they need to all know everybody else's roles as well. Okay, the next piece, you're going to just determine your schedule of meetings, and you want it to be basically a flexible but regular schedule, because the more you meet, the more, of course, you get to know how people communicate, what their skills are, things of that nature. And that's going to be critical, again, when an emergency happens and panic levels and stress levels are very high. Pinnacle Charter currently meets quarterly. They have about 20 people on their team. Again, this is probably not going to be the size of yours. I know initially when they started out a few years ago, they probably had 3 people on their team. So realize that that's probably closer to where you'll be, maybe 3 or 5 or 6, kind of getting going. Also, initially, as you kind of hammer out some of these details, you're probably going to need to meet monthly. And then for revisions and practices, you can stretch it out to this quarterly piece. But I do want to reiterate here that this plan is not a one and done. It's constantly revising, constantly tweaking to make sure that you are completely up to date on situations that could happen. Okay, woo! Step 1's complete, everybody. Yay, that's the first step. So again, hopefully we broke it out into a sense where it's not so overwhelming, and you can get through that with your team once you kind of get that going. Typically, there's one person kind of handling that piece to set up the structure, get ready to send out the invitations as far as who's going to be solicited to be on the team. And this next part is when you've got your team together, ready to go, moving on to step 2, understanding the situation. Again, this is part of the Department of Ed's recommended 6-step process, understand the situation. So this is much more involved. Here's where you're going to actually be looking for possible threats and hazards, and then assessing those risks and vulnerabilities of threats and hazards that you identified. What's important here is that you're going to need to address not only your school, but your local community. And we'll get into that into a little bit more detail as we go through these pieces. How do we get going on understanding the situation? We're going to set up a way to identify these threats. Internally, your school safety team, and this is your core, again, your core school safety team, kind of meets and gets together and really talks about what threats and hazards has the school faced in the past, and what threats and hazards has our community faced in the past. So for example, are there roads that have construction on them, like what's happening up in the Glenwood Springs area, that are going to be closed and are going to prevent any evacuations? What do we do in those types of situations? Are there, let's see, are there areas nearby that might be more susceptible to having negative events happen? For example, liquor stores or things of that nature where robberies might occur. So again, you want to think about what threats and hazards has the school faced recently, but also the community. Because you're going to be needing to evacuate kids potentially. You're going to be needing to handle traffic patterns for parents coming to get information or pick up their kids. So you've got to make sure that that's part of your process. And then, of course, considering what will the school and the community face in the future. What's coming down the road? What's the Planning Commission working on? Here again, seek data from your local, state, and federal agencies. After you guys have kind of done it on an internal basis, it's time to reach out and see what resources, what plans have these other agencies got available for you to review and check out. Again, I put on here your school district, or if you're with CSI, they have their plans. You need to make sure you're aware of whether or not you're included in those plans and how you're included in those plans. Are they going to be helping you in an evacuation? Are they going to be providing resources for reunification? At what level is your school district or CSI representative going to be able to provide assistance? We actually strongly recommend that you get your school district safety liaison person to be a part of your school core safety team. If you have any trouble getting their engagement, again, please reach out to us and we will see if we can help initiate that level of engagement for you, because it is going to be critical. And I can tell you that, again, a tip from Pinnacle has been that when they have had to evacuate off-site, the ability to reach out to their district, which I believe is Adams 12, and have Adams 12 safety team go to the reunification point and be there prior to the students arriving was absolutely essential into the very fast response times that they were able to get those kids and those parents back together with each other. It was absolutely critical to take care of the minor injuries that were sustained, getting out food and water for the hours. As many of you know, or maybe it's not kind of commonsensical, when you do experience an emergency incident at your school, lockdowns and shelter in place could be hours, 6, 8 hours, well beyond what somebody can handle as far as not having food or water or medical aid. So reach out to your districts, try to get the safety liaisons or some representative at least on your core safety team, and please contact the league if you would like our help in affecting that with you. Okay, now it's time to assess the risks that you have identified. So evaluating these risks, right, you want to understand about a few things. You want to understand the probability that it will occur, the effects that it will likely have, and the severity, the likely severity of the impact, the time that you will have as a school to warn students about it, and how long this threat might last. So the Department of Ed suggests these essential assessments: the site assessment, a culture and climate assessment, the school threat assessment, and capacity assessment, and then number 5, the risk and vulnerability assessment, which is kind of a culmination of all of the above. So let's take a look at each of these pieces. The site assessment is pretty straightforward. It examines the safety, accessibility, and emergency preparedness of your buildings and grounds. You're going to want to make sure that it includes, but is not limited to, these bullet points I've got here. You want to make sure the access and egress is clearly understood, the visibility, the structural integrity. You want to make sure that you are considering any special needs students, staff, or other community members that might be in your building at the time of an incident. And most especially, examining access for emergency vehicles. That's going to be critical, that you have some way for them to be able to get into your school and get to the necessary points to communicate with your incident commander as quickly as possible. Here's another tip from Pinnacle Charter School. They have provided Wi-Fi access outside of their building at the emergency access area for their emergency responders in the event that they need to communicate via Wi-Fi versus any other method, if other things are down or they can't get to see them personally, and also to share any technology-enabled facts such as layouts of the building, things of that nature. So that's something to consider, as like you might want to put in some Wi-Fi access outside of your building in a specific area. We can get into those details with IT folks later, but to make sure that there is communication available. All of this is going to give you the knowledge to know what facilities on your campus or nearby your campus are accessible to students, staff, parents, volunteer workers, whatever, if you need to move someone to another place to shelter in place, and which ones can be used in compliance with the law. So that's a really important assessment. Next piece of your puzzle is going to be to do the culture and climate assessment. Many schools do this on a regular basis anyway as part of their kind of board reviews, annual board reviews. So you may be able to take a piece of that. If not, adding these items in is going to be something that would be great to do, so that you easily have access to the information and you can kind of also track trends in that, and hopefully it's getting better over the years as you start implementing some of these practices and procedures. Reviewing all of this data basically is going to give you an understanding of cultural gaps that you might have as far as safety. Certainly when there are positive climates in a nurturing environment, people are more likely to report possible threats to aid in the prevention of incidents. So this is really an important piece. And again, one of the things that you're going to do is also become aware of, if you're not already, of behaviors either from staff or students that, or parents as well, that need to be addressed professionally if appropriate, let's say. Please note though, if you use student surveys, you must protect the student's privacy and have to comply with all applicable laws and regulations. So that student piece is really complex. If you have any questions, you're going to need to consult with legal counsel to ensure compliance with all the relevant statutes. So do not add that to your assessment until you've gotten that guidance to be sure you are in compliance completely. Okay, that next assessment that you're going to do is the school threat assessment. This has been in our vocabulary much more often in the past 3 years. This is where you're going to, analyze communication and behaviors to determine whether student and staff or folks may pose a threat. It's highly recommended that all of your staff, every single person on your staff, should be knowledgeable to a degree about school threat assessment, because this can happen in classrooms, playgrounds, anywhere. Please note that these assessments must be based on fact. And again, they must comply with privacy, civil rights, and other applicable laws. So your threat assessment Basically, how you formulate that is going to need to be carefully done. You can consult with legal counsel, but also the Colorado School Safety Resource Center has developed a threat assessment for resource for schools. It's down there, I put the link to it. It's a free resource. I encourage all of you to take a look at that. Also, the School Safety Resource Center offers free trainings for schools. So if your staff has not been made familiar with how to perform these types of things, I strongly encourage you to reach out to the Resource Center and schedule a campus-wide threat assessment training session. Because again, you want to try to obviously prevent and identify any of these threats before an actual incident occurs. The capacity assessment. Okay, so this is number 4. We're getting down to one of the last pieces. Again, these are recommended, but there are a lot of other suitable assessments out there. Please don't think that this is all you should use. Reach out to different resources, check with other schools to see what they've done. Actually, speaking of that, let me just interject here. Pinnacle School has created relationships with their geographically located nearby schools. I encourage you to do the same, because being able to rely again on another school to help you in the event your team is either stuck in lockdown or simply can't get to a reunification or evacuation point in a timely fashion, you can reach out and get assistance from other schools. So do try to build those relationships as well. So the capacity assessment. This is examining the capabilities of your students and staff, as well as the services and resources of your community partners. Your planning team needs to know what is at your disposal now, as well as what you guys need to start acquiring. So you want to see basically if you've got on your team folks with the following skills. If not on your team, are they on your staff? First aid certification, search and rescue, definitely the counseling and mental health expertise, and folks who can help those with disabilities or other special needs in a situation. Inventory, equipment, and supplies. This list is by no means complete, but it starts to get you thinking of the equipment and the needs that you're going to want to have on hand. I know a lot of schools have what they call go bags, which have some medical supplies, some food and water, toilet paper, to be honest. I mean, Pinnacle has a great bags, again, because they've had to do this a few times. So as we go forward throughout this webinar series, they are going to be assisting us and providing us with more insights that we can provide along to you, but they are happy to assist and chat with anyone who's interested in talking with them directly as well. Okay, so now that we've got these 4 assessments done, we're moving into the risk and vulnerability assessment. Basically here you're going to capture the information that obtained from those any previous assessments you've done. Hopefully at least those 4, but if you've done additional ones as well. And you're going to, these are the areas that you're going to check on. We mentioned this a few slides ago, the probability or the frequency of the potential occurrence, the magnitude, the time, the duration. These are the things that you're going to be looking at. What does that look like? Here's a sample of what you could do. You could put it into a rating scale to help you, use kind of a mathematical method for setting those up as to whether they're highly likely, are they catastrophic. We put some samples here for you to look at and going through each and every possible threat and hazard that you identified and getting it into a table. Once you've got that done, the next step is to start prioritizing based on where things went. And most likely one of the most frequently used is the high, medium, or low risk way. By doing this, of course, you are able to kind of Start categorizing and prioritizing what materials you need to purchase, what materials need to be on hand, what trainings you need to get for your staff and your safety team, and what those exercises that we'll do later on in the process, which of those tabletop exercises and so forth need to be addressed most quickly. Now your team should have a pretty good idea of your school's vulnerabilities, and step 2 is complete. So, yay! Again, I know it's not really complete, but I've kind of walked you through what it's going to be, and step by step you can kind of get to these portions, and with each action that you take, you are, increasing the safety for your students, your families, and your staff. So you're making progress every step of the way. Congratulations on that. And this actually concludes our webinar for this particular first step of handling those top 2. Please work on those 2 steps prior to our September 20th webinar, when we'll be going into step number 3. So hopefully it works out and we can all be aligned and ready to go on to the next action. Here we've got some additional resources for you. Again, please reach out. Amber is the school safety manager at the Pinnacle Charter School. I want to say she's been working on their plan probably for 6 years or more, at least. So again, the insights that they have are going to be amazing and fantastic, and I encourage you to reach out to her. She also does some trainings with her staff that she has let us know she's open to having other school leaders come and check out. She trains their staff annually on safety, and they also train their students annually for emergency incidents. And it's a great plan. They do a great job over there. Also, if you have any questions, perhaps of compliance or statutory requirements, feel free to reach out to Jessica Johnson, our Director of Policy and Legal Initiatives, and she can be of service there. I can be of help as far as helping get engagement from your authorizers or perhaps any of your emergency partners who may not be initially interested in participating. I want to encourage you to reach out to us for that. And remember, Jessica had me put this piece in for all of you. The school safety plan should be continuously reviewed and refined to best address potential emergency situation. The League is presenting this guidance as an example of good practices and matters to consider. The guidance does not create any requirements nor any additional rights. This is only informational guidance, provides examples that may be helpful. Any references or resources that are included in this webinar or throughout our series should not be considered endorsements, and nothing in this webinar should be construed as legal advice. If this was legal advice, you would be speaking to a lawyer in detail and you would be spending a lot more money. So the League recommends that, again, you seek plan, guidance, and participation first from your authorizer and then from legal counsel on a regular basis. Let's see. Any questions? Here's that date reminder just to be sure. And here's my contact information and also, again, our sponsor, School Safe Communications, if you'd like to get any two-way devices or if you'd like to have some training on the use of those devices. I know Mike is a former actual police officer or sheriff's deputy, I believe. I'm not seeing any questions. I hope that doesn't mean you guys are too overwhelmed. I hope we did what we set out to do, which was to kind of break this down into manageable pieces and help you get going on making sure that your school and community are safe. Oh, good. Do you have to register for the next webinar separately? You do, John, only because we have got to get that information up on the website. However, I do want to remind you that all of these webinars will be recorded. Those of you who attended today, we will be sending you a link, and you can download the slides from the file here, or we will also send them in our follow-up email. So yes, we're going to need you to register for each webinar separately, just so we send the links to those who want to attend the live session. And also so that we can see that this is still of interest and it's being worthwhile for our school leaders to attend. Appreciate all of you attending. Feel free to reach out to us personally if you don't have any questions that you want to share with the group at this point in time. We're actually ending early. Okay, no last minute questions. Excellent. I hope this was helpful. We are looking for your feedback, so we've got a little post here if you have time to answer it.